welcome to Live Interactive English. Hello, I'm Matt.
Hello, I'm Winnie.
Today we're looking at an article called Tetris, the game that conquered the world. Okay, so Winnie, have you ever played Tetris?
Not only have I played it, I love this game. This is one of my favorite games that I always return to. It has a very special place in my heart. I once played it for a whole summer that I started going cross-eyed, and I would go to bed very dizzy because I would just see shapes and blocks and colors, and I would start dreaming about shapes and colors and blocks. I had a problem for sure.
That sounds like too much to be playing Tetris. So what were you playing the Tetris on? What kind of video game system?
Right, and as many people know, Tetris is a very old game, so I started playing when I was very young. So my first time would be on a Game Boy.
Okay.
This is kind of showing my age a bit, but yeah, a Game Boy, and then phones started having it.
Oh, okay.
So then I would play on my phone, and then now I have it on my Xbox. I also have it on my Switch and my iPhone.
You still play Tetris now?
I feel judgment, but yes, I do. And I love this game, and because it's a very simple game that doesn't require a lot of knowledge of how to, like games these days, you kind of have to be really good at shooting or something.
Right, you just press the button to turn the shape, and then up or down, or just down.
Yeah, you can't go up. But yeah, so I like the simplicity of it. And you know how you can also choose like a calm Zen mode instead of it coming really fast and like passing the level. So I really like that, there are different versions of the game too.
Okay, well, we're gonna learn a lot more about, how this game was created and where it comes from when we get into today's article.
It is one of the most popular video games of all time, with over 500 million copies sold. It is also, perhaps, one of the simplest, with the goal being to arrange falling shapes into rows that clear once completed. Players score points by clearing as many rows as possible before the shapes stack up too high and end the game. Sound familiar? I'm talking, of course, about Tetris.
So we have our topic of the day, Tetris, the game that conquered the world, part 1. Speaking of conquered, what does that mean?
So conquered means to take or take over, usually often a place, and it's often by military force, like when an army takes over something, there's a battle and they win, they have conquered that place. But we also use this word meaning to overcome obstacles to win something. So when we talk about conquering the world, we mean that this game has just become popular all over the world.
Right. The meaning of conquered has changed with time because we're not really talking about taking over countries anymore or land. We're talking about things that are like obstacles.
Like dominating an industry.
Right,
so
exactly.
Taking over that sector, becoming the most popular of a certain thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So another example, the singer conquered the music industry with his popular songs.
Right, different type of conquer, yeah.
So let's get into the article. It is one of the most popular video games of all time, with over 500 million copies sold.
Wow, that's a lot of cheddar.
It is also perhaps one of the simplest, with the goal being to arrange falling shapes into rows that clear once completed.
See, this is what I love about Tetris, the simplicity. Continuing on. Players score points by clearing as many rows as possible before the shapes stack up too high and end the game. And stack basically just means to pile something, put something on top of another. Yeah.
This game is very simple, and that's, I think, like you said, that's why it's so popular, because anyone can start to play it.
Right.
And you might think it's easy at first, but it gets much more difficult as it gets faster and faster.
Yeah, don't let it fool you. You can really, it starts to get really fast and you get nervous.
Sound familiar? I'm talking, of course, about Tetris?
Familiar to me because, like I said, I love this game.
Familiar, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's familiar to many people.
Right. And so what is familiar? Familiar is an adjective, and it means when something is well known and it's not a new thing. You're used to it. You've seen it before. And just like I said, I've seen this game multiple times a year. Okay, at least. So, for example, as I walked out of the airport, I saw a familiar face, right? Okay. So a familiar face is someone, oh, I know that person. Yeah, or maybe you could even say a familiar face. You might not know the person, or it could be a celebrity.
All right. Well, this game is also familiar to me. I did play it on Game Boy as a child.
Right.
But I haven't played it.
Not as an adult.
I just haven't played it in many, many years, I think.
Well, this touches my heart immensely, okay? So I have a very big passion for Tetris, but I'm excited to know more about the game that I love so much after the break.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。今天的课文标题是 Tetris, the game that conquered the world， 风靡全球的俄罗斯方块。标题里面用到单字 conquer， 它就可以表达征服、占领或是克服，是个动词。那同学们喜欢玩俄罗斯方块吗？大家应该都对这个电玩游戏很熟悉吧？课文提到说，它是有史以来最受欢迎的电玩游戏之一，销量超过5亿份。那这个游戏的目标就是要把落下来的形状排列成行。那一旦排列成完整的行，它就会消除掉，玩家就要尽量的把它消掉，以免这个形状堆太高，那你的游戏就结束咯。好，课文单字写到这个 familiar 就是形容熟悉的、常见的、耳熟能详的。那补充一下 Winnie 老师他刚刚聊到他非常热衷于俄罗斯方块，老师用到一个副词叫 immensely， immensely 这个副词就可以表达非常、极其怎么样怎么样。那这边一个重点，我们进入文法时间。这边我们来学习 with 加受词加受词补语，这个句型是用来说明原因或是表达附带状况。受词补语可以用分词、形容词或介系词片语。如果我们要用分词当受词补语的话，就要看受词跟补语的关系，主动用现在分词 VING， 被动用过去分词 PP。我们看两个例句。It's bad manners to talk with your mouth full. 满嘴食物还说话是不礼貌的。这时候受词补语我们用到了形容词 full. He felt nervous with so many people watching him. 有这么多人看着他，他感到很紧張。这时候受词补语我们用到的是现在分词 watching. 好，那我们接着回到课文中。
Tetris was created in 1985 by a puzzle-loving Russian programmer named Alexei Pajitnov. As a young software engineer at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, he had been tasked with coming up with games to test the new Electronica 60 computer. One day, he had a flash of inspiration. He would try to recreate a puzzle game from his childhood on the computer. The childhood game was simple. Players would fit blocks of different shapes into a box without leaving any gaps. However, this would not do for a computer game. There had to be more excitement. So, Pajitnov had the blocks drop down from the top of the screen one at a time, forcing the player to make quick decisions to avoid disaster. The further through the game the player went, the faster the blocks would drop. Tetris was born.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were describing this game where you drop shapes onto each other to make rows, and the more rows you clear, you score points. And of course, everyone's heard of this game because this is the game of Tetris that is popular the world over.
Right, you said score points, but really it's points for the soul too. So continuing on with the article. Tetris was created in 1985 by a puzzle-loving Russian programmer named Alexei Pajitnov. As a young software engineer at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, he had been tasked with coming up with games to test the new Electronica 60 computer. One day, he had a flash of inspiration.
Okay, so he's making computers, he's learning new things. I mean, he's not, I wouldn't expect him to be making, like fun games. He's just making games to test this computer. So it's
Right.
not actually.
Yeah, it's just something that's kind of like a side project to help with his main task, which is, producing computer softwares and just making the computers really usable, right? Really great. But who would have thought that, he made something so amazing?
Well, he did have a flash of inspiration. So a flash of something means a sudden and usually very fast occurrence of something. Maybe not lasting very long either. So it just happens like when you think of a flash of lightning. A lightning bolt strikes very quickly and very suddenly, and it's over very quickly as well.
Right.
So for example, Ed felt a flash of anger when he heard the news.
Right, it's not like it's a slow buildup of anger. It's right away. Okay, and then we have our word inspiration, which is a noun. And it basically just means the process of feeling like you want to create or make something. Yeah, so he had that flash of inspiration. Yeah.
So meaning that he, suddenly felt this urge to make something.
Right, exactly. So for example, in a moment of inspiration, George started writing a beautiful poem.
All right, so that's interesting that he had a flash of inspiration. I'm excited to hear, how that inspiration came about.
Right.
He would try to recreate a puzzle game from his childhood on the computer. Very interesting. The childhood game was simple. Players would fit blocks of different shapes into a box without leaving any gaps.
That makes sense as to why nowadays so many people of different ages play Tetris very naturally, because we all kind of grew up playing with blocks.
Yeah, and I think of these, there's sometimes these puzzles where you have different shaped blocks and you have to figure out how to get them into a certain box or a certain shape.
Yeah.
And it's often very difficult because you can turn them any way.
Right,
And you have
yeah.
to fit them all in exactly correctly. And so they had to fit them in without leaving any gaps.
Right.
So a gap is a space or opening between things. So between, we might think of, if you've ever been on the London Tube, the trains in the underground on the tube, there's a very, common thing you hear, which they say, mind the gap, which means watch out for that space between the train and the train platform.
Right. Taipei doesn't really have that problem anymore because they've installed those doors now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you still have to watch out for
still
that
do, yeah.
space or that
Gap.
So another example, my neighbor keeps looking through the gap in my garden fence.
That's kind of creepy. So continuing on, however, this would not do for a computer game. There had to be more excitement. So Pajitnov had the blocks drop down from the top of the screen one at a time, forcing the player to make quick decisions to avoid disaster. Yeah.
And that's what makes it exciting,
Right.
is that you are the entire time trying to avoid losing. You're just
Yeah.
trying to stay on the edge of winning.
Right.
And it gets faster and faster and scarier,
Yeah,
even
well,
though it's not scary, but
it's-
you start to feel scared as you're playing because of the pressure.
Like you said, it is different from real life, because real life you can just twist it a little, fit it in, whatever. But when you're playing a game, everyone has that element of excitement, because and I think part of the fun is knowing there's not, nothing's actually going to happen to you if you lose, but it gives you enough adrenaline and excitement to kind of get to the next level. Which brings me to the word disaster, and that is a noun, and it just means a sudden event or accident, such as natural catastrophes like earthquakes or tornadoes, which cause great damage. Okay, so for example, the family narrowly escaped disaster when hiking through the woods. Yeah, so we're exaggerating a little bit by saying to avoid or escape the disaster, but really you're just gonna lose the round.
Well, if you put a lot of time into getting to that high
Yeah.
level,
That would be
then it would be a
heartbreaking.
disaster
Yeah.
to have wasted all that time.
Yeah.
The further through the game the player went, the faster the blocks would drop. Tetris was born.
And thus the game of my life and my love was invented. Who would have thought that, although actually, I take that back. I think it's not that surprising that Tetris was born from I wouldn't say a child's game, but kind of like a child development game, such as blocks. Because you look at the colors, it's very bright, and the blocks are very, it's not like the blocks are very big. They're only made of like 3 to 4 pieces. So it does remind me of my childhood blocks.
Okay, well, it's an interesting way to come up with a new game. Maybe I'll start thinking about other childhood toys and how I can
try to make some money.
Make some money by making a new game.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to have learned about one of my favorite games, but we're going to learn way more about this game in the next episode.
俄罗斯方块是在1985年由一位热爱解谜游戏的俄罗斯城市设计师帕基特诺夫所创造的。他当时被交付的任务是要开发游戏来测试新型电脑。那有一天，他灵光一闪，想要在电脑上重现童年时期的一款益智游戏。这游戏其实很简单，就是玩家要把不同形状的积木放到盒子里，不留任何的空隙。不过以电脑游戏来说，这是行不通的，必须要有更多的刺激感嘛。所以呢，他就让这个方块从萤幕顶端落下来，一次一个，那迫使玩家就要快速的做出决定，以避免灾难发生。好，那么玩家在游戏当中进行的越久，这个方块掉的速度就越快，俄罗斯方块就此诞生了。同学们有玩过，应该都知道，当这个方块落下速度越来越快，会让人觉得紧张刺激，激发肾上腺素。那 Winnie 老师有提到，肾上腺素的这个英文是 adrenaline。好，那么课文单字提到这个 flash， 当名词它可以表达闪现，可能是我们想法情绪等等突然出现那种闪现，或者是它也有闪耀的意思。那它可以当动词来表达闪烁，使闪烁。Matt 老师在解释时，他用到 lightning bolt， 就是指闪电。好，下一个单字 inspiration， 它表示灵感来源或是指启发。那么 gap， 它表示裂口、缺口或是缝隙。单字例句写说，我的邻居一直从我的花园围墙缝隙看过来。Winnie 老师觉得哇，这很毛欸。老师用到 creepy 这个字 ，creepy，creepy 是形容令人毛骨悚然的。我们再看到课文故意用到 disaster 这个字，叫做灾难，或者是灾祸，或是彻底的失败。那 Winnie 老师解释时，他有提到 catastrophe， 我们可以学起来 catastrophe，catastrophe 表示大灾难或者是灾祸。好，这边2个重点，我们进入文法时间。我们来看第一个重点是 task 当及物动词，表示指派什么什么任务。Task somebody with 加上名词或动名词是表达把什么任务交付给某人。那被动用法会是 somebody be tasked with 加上名词或动名词。举例来说 Jimmy and his brother were tasked with setting up the tent. Jimmy 和他弟弟被交付了搭帐篷的任务。好，那第二个重点是双重比较级，那这是用来表达2种情况之间的消长关系，也就是越怎么样就越怎么样。它的句型是 the 比较级主词加动词，逗号 the 比较级主词加动词。其中的比较级我们可以用到形容词比较级、副词比较级，或是你也可以用 more 或是 fewer 去搭配可数名词，或者是用 more 或 less 去搭配不可数名词。我们造2个例句。The earlier you start saving, the sooner you can reach your goals. 你越早开始存钱，就能越快达成目标。The more cream you add, the thicker your soup will be. 你加越多鲜奶油，汤就会越浓稠。好，那么以上今天的讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
It is one of the most popular video games of all time, with over 500 million copies sold. It is also, perhaps, one of the simplest, with the goal being to arrange falling shapes into rows that clear once completed. Players score points by clearing as many rows as possible before the shapes stack up too high and end the game. Sound familiar? I'm talking, of course, about Tetris. Tetris was created in 1985 by a puzzle-loving Russian programmer named Alexei Pajitnov. As a young software engineer at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, he had been tasked with coming up with games to test the new Electronica 60 computer. One day, he had a flash of inspiration. He would try to recreate a puzzle game from his childhood on the computer. The childhood game was simple. Players would fit blocks of different shapes into a box without leaving any gaps. However, this would not do for a computer game. There had to be more excitement. So, Pajitnov had the blocks drop down from the top of the screen one at a time, forcing the player to make quick decisions to avoid disaster. The further through the game the player went, the faster the blocks would drop. Tetris was born.
Check it out.
Matt, I think there might be some errors in this report.
What? You're always criticizing me. You're so mean.
Matt, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just pointing out a possible mistake. Don't be such a snowflake.
Snowflake? But we're indoors.
No, Matt. Snowflake as in fragile and easily hurt. See, look. Wrong. Wrong. Wrong and wrong. Ah. Hi everyone. Today's term is snowflake.
Yes, and it doesn't always mean a flake of snow. It also refers to someone who is easily upset, especially when it comes to criticism.
That's right. It is believed to have originated from the physical qualities of snowflakes, which are delicate and can easily break apart.
Yes, so if someone is described as a snowflake, it means they are fragile and can easily be hurt emotionally.
Right. In modern slang, a snowflake can refer to someone who is overly sensitive or easily offended.
Here's an example sentence. Don't be such a snowflake. It's just a joke.
Or, my friend is such a snowflake. She gets upset over the smallest things.
It's important to remember that everyone has their own sensitivity levels, and it's not always a bad thing to be a snowflake.
Absolutely. Being sensitive can mean you're more empathetic and aware of others' feelings. But it's also essential to learn how to handle criticism constructively.
Well said, Karen. That's all for today, folks. Don't be a snowflake. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.